Plug.
Oh my God!
Huh? Huh? Huh?
SUBNAUTICA, a game that will confuse people outside of the survival game community and induce PTSD in those within it. It is hailed by many as one of the best horror games of all time, up there with the likes of Silent Hill and Resident Evil 4. And the best part? It was completely unintentional. That's right, this was supposed to be just a silly underwater survival game until a few genius madmen decided to add abominations to the game, such as the Ghost Leviathan, the Sea Dragon, and the face of the game, the... Just look up a compilation of some YouTubers freaking out over this goofy guy, and you'll see why. Beneath the terrifying surface of this metaphorical and literal body of water, however, is an atmosphere, a setting, and gameplay that makes this one of, if not my favorite game of all time. This is all amplified, of course, by what is in my opinion one of the best soundtracks and some of the best sound design in any game ever. That is the main subject of today's video, but before we get into it, I need to first explain Subnautica itself for those who are uneducated. Subnautica is a game that has the perfect mix of serenity, calmness, nuclear radiation, and of course cosmic, thalassophobic, and existential horrors. You play as a mutant named Riley, who is working for the 22nd century Star Wars looking ass version of Amazon, Altera. You were stationed on an expedition ship that was tasked with going to the far reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy to build a phase gate. But that never happened, as while you were passing a planet designated 4546b, the ship was shot by a giant fucking laser. We'll get to that in a bit. You find your way to a life pod, which detaches from the ship as it crashes. You get knocked out in the chaos, and after you come to and have a bit of a fire trouble, you soon find out that the planet you crashed on was an ocean planet. Luckily, you didn't land in the deep no-no zone, and instead landed on, quote, the crater, which is a weird name considering it is higher than the surrounding ocean floor, technically making it a plateau. Even more lucky is the fact that the air is breathable. Talk about convenience. With that, you then need to venture into the water to collect resources, including a copious amount of
Titanium.
to repair your equipment and craft new tools that will help your ocean exploration. Along the way, you will encounter a bunch of really unique and cool creatures, from the peeper, to the suicide bomberfish, to the... You sadly can't completely avoid some of these more horrific monsters, however, as the place you need to go to get the materials you need to escape the planet are fucking surrounded by them. You will also come across a bunch of old precursor technology, including the big-ass laser that shot down your ship. Oh crap, there goes another one. And oh crap, the Aurora's reactive core blew up, spitting harmful radiation everywhere. Just your luck. On top of that, you're infected with an incurable disease unless, of course, you travel through literal hell to find a big fish that can heal you with its suspiciously colored liquid. So, you do that. But, of course, that's not the end of it. One of the most frightening parts of the game is when you find this thing. That's a giant skeleton. And the data entry says it's only a third of this skeleton. That would mean that this creature would be at least a kilometer long. So yeah, it's scary because it leaves the thought of that thing in your head. So, you've done the exploring. You've gotten cured by the suspicious alien goo, and you've done whatever you need to do. You finally get to build a spaceship and go home. Then, nothing ever happens on the planet until the eventual second installment of the game. Nope. Totally not like there's a spin-off game with a cool atmosphere and concept that is held back by the size of the explorable areas and by the one-dimensional voiced characters that bring less connection to the story than a few recorded audio logs and a guy who only groans when he's hurt like it's Dark Souls 1. Anyway, that's a very brief summary of this colossal game, so if you want to experience it for yourself, I would play it. But now it's time to talk about the main subject of the video, the music and sound work. and the controversy surrounding it. First of all, I'm going to say that I personally like separating art from artist, you know, like Kanye West. No matter how much he loves the Mustache Man, you can't deny that I Wonder is a good song. I'll go into the nitty-gritty of the situation later though. For now, let's just talk about the sounds and the music of Subnautica. Let's first talk about the overall sound design. To make things short, it's great. Just play through this game more than an hour and you will start to realize that. One of my most memorable moments out of all my gaming experiences was my first time playing the game, approaching the Aurora. If you don't know, in the area dubbed the Crash Zone, there are a few Reaper Leviathans who are attracted to the area by the sound of the crash and the subsequent explosion. I, of course, didn't know this as I had only been playing the game for 5 hours at this point and thought I was, for the most part, safe. But then the water got all murky as I entered the area, restricting my visibility, and I saw a shadow just barely in the distance, moving. Then I heard the deafening, frightening roar, and I was immediately out of there. Between the shadows in the distance I had seen and the sound that I had heard, I did not want to go back to that area until my PDA physically told me I needed to. I was so scared that I did not want to go back. You see, usually in a horror game, you're constantly bombarded with creepy environmental factors like sounds, so you come to expect it. With Subnautica, however, it's different. During a casual playthrough, you spend your first few hours in the safe shallows and the surrounding kelp forests and grassy plateaus. These areas, sure, they have their scary moments and their scary sounds. The violent sand sharks and the lurking stalkers come to mind. However, for the most part, you can easily avoid these smaller creatures. You start to feel safe, and you come to expect these smaller scares with the smaller creatures, and you start to wonder why the people over-exaggerated the horror aspect a bit online. But then the game throws a complete curveball and hits you in the face with a 55-meter long fish out of hell. The roars and groans that these bigger creatures give off are so shockingly different from what you're used to hearing at this point that you have this primal instinct to just run away from what might be making that sound, which is only amplified by the limited amount of visibility in the water. Even some of the smaller creatures that appear in the game have the same effect. One creature that comes to mind is the crab squid located in the bulb zone in the Grand Reef. While after playing this game a few times they become more of an annoyance, they scared the shit out of me the first time I came across one. They have a tendency to blend into the glowing environment around them so they can be hard to spot, again making the sounds all the more effective. This specific creature is especially terrifying for those who are afraid of bugs and spiders and whatnot. The sounds they make usually sound like, well, bugs. If you've ever heard a hissing cockroach and a bunch of crickets at the same time, it's sort of like that. And then once it aggroes onto you, it lets out a really loud blast, which made me jump out of my seat. With the added fact that this blast can disrupt your electronics in-game, it's all the more terrifying when you hear the screeches of this thing and your Seamoth isn't swimming away properly. This is the same effect that happens with other creatures like the Warper, who have similar bug-like sounds. And what's worse, this one teleports you to it. So at first you hear this creepy crawly sound, and then it flashes purple all over the screen, and then there's this thing in front of you in open water attacking you. But not only does the sound affect the scares of the game, but the overall atmosphere as well. From the sound effects of the monsters, to the groans of the player character, to the whale-like wails, pun intended, of the gastropods and reefbacks, you can really tell that a lot of work was put into the environment and the sounds that go along with it. Then there's the soundtrack, which is actually god tier, with a total of 56 beautiful and stunning tracks that all perfectly represent and encapsulate this game's essence and its message of environmental beauty. The best examples of this are in the first few tracks, which serve to set the overall tone for the game. They give off this chill, yet mysterious vibe, like you're safe, but there's something lurking just outside your vision. This example I'm talking about are specifically tracks 3 and 4, Tropical Eden and God Rays. These are two of my favorite tracks in the whole game, and as they come right after each other, they effectively go together. The first, Tropical Eden, has this chill and smooth beat, and it honestly goes hard too. Like, I want to see someone rap using this as a sample hard. But then you go to God Rays, which is more of the same, but a bit more on the mysterious side. This second song also serves as a bridge between the first 3 calm songs and the darker and odd songs such as tracks 5 and 6, In Bloom and Precipice. And I feel this represents a realization you will go through in the early stages of playing this game. There is a lot more out there that I am not aware of. This change in tone happens multiple times back and forth throughout the soundtrack, signifying the different biomes and creatures you encounter throughout the game, with a usually cool and chill soundtrack introducing the zone. But, of course, as you dig deeper into that area and find more and more disturbing things, the music takes on a more disturbing tone to go with it. It does break this pattern, of course, to keep the player engaged. One great example of this is when the music goes from an holy shit, this soundtrack goes so hard. Not only do you have all the chill and the mysterious music, but some of the most metal techno music ever. But there's also the occasional odd decision with the music, and I mean like odd as in an odd Easter egg within it. For example, the song Sparse Reef. If you go to the 1:18-second mark of the song, you can hear a distorted version of the clip of the 47th President of the United States saying China. Yeah, so there were some decisions made there. Alright, anyway, back to these banger songs. The more upbeat songs are for the quote-unquote chase sections of the game. Like, one of the best tracks in the entire album, Abandoned Ship, is only really played when a big submarine you can make in the game called the Cyclops has sustained heavy damage and is on fire. There is also the other quote-unquote banger song, Leviathan, which is supposed to play when a Reaper Leviathan is aggroed onto you, but clearly it rarely does, because half of the videos you see on this game are channels reposting a compilation of YouTubers getting jump scared out of their minds from nowhere by these grinning, butt-chinned oarfish. But still, after experiencing the same experience 50 gazillion times on my own, it still scares the absolute crap out of me. It just goes to show how good the suspense and atmosphere are in this game. Anyway, back to the music. These 56 amazing tracks really go hard and again perfectly encapsulate the theme and the environment of the first game. Wait, did I say first game? That's right, there is more than one Subnautica game. Thomas, you mean the one coming out in the next year or two for early access, right? No, I mean the spin-off game that I mentioned earlier, Subnautica Below Zero. Before I get into what the soundtrack and the sound work in general is like for this game, I would probably sum it up. In this game, you play as some snotty, bitchy woman trying to find the reason her sister died. You see, after the events of the first game, Altair decided to do some more research on the planet. During that time, they found a giant leviathan frozen in ice, which is covered in the Kara virus, and they decided to study it. The main character's sister mysteriously died during these experiments, with Altair saying it happened due to an unforeseen accident or some crap. Spoiler alert, that's exactly what happened. Apparently, she didn't want the corporation to sample this deadly disease, which is valid, I guess. But then she decided to be a dumbass and blow the whole place up, killing everyone along with herself. Like, the whole game was building up to this reveal about what actually happened, and apparently it was actually a quote-unquote workplace accident caused by the sister we wanted to find. And then the rest of the game revolves around teaming up with this hyper-intelligent alien stranded on the planet or whatever. You see, I didn't play this game, and I don't really plan to. I was originally interested in the first game because it was a concept I had never really heard of before, but now I had that experience. I watched a playthrough of Below Zero and was a bit turned off. I saw Markiplier or Jacksepticeye play this and immediately saw, yeah, it was cool, but the first game, in many people's opinions, did nearly everything better than Below Zero, so I found it redundant when I could just replay the game I already owned for an overall better experience. Don't get me wrong, I love the atmosphere of this Arctic-themed place, and I love the designs of all the different species in it. In fact, I would say I prefer a lot of the creature concepts in this game compared to the first one. Like, would you rather have a giant transparent squid with a whole mini ecosystem inside of it, or this fat ass who shits everywhere? Probably the first one. And honestly, I don't really like the Sea Dragon Leviathan in the first game, where you are less of a horror game scared and more like seeing a dragon appear out of nowhere while you're level 3 in Skyrim scared. The problem that holds this game back from being as good as the first one, though, is the constant nagging remarks from the characters, especially the new protagonist. In the first game, you had Riley, who was mute. This made him feel like a blank slate that you could replace yourself with. Riley is only a name mentioned in the lore surrounding the game, used as a placeholder for the player. This allowed you to feel like you were the one actually experiencing the environment around you. However, in Below Zero, you'll discover this new creepy and interesting creature, then your character will make some snarky remark like a smartass, ruining at least some of the immersion in the moment. And this interrupting dynamic goes for every single other cool aspect of the game as well, including the sound design and music. Some of the audio elements are just as cool and sometimes even cooler than some of the sound design in the old game. Like, you could tell the new person in charge of these things, Bren Prunty, am I saying that name right? Put a lot of hard effort into this, but that can all be ruined easily when you're chilling to some of the music and you hear a voice saying,
"Holy smokes! That did not go as planned. I should find a way into the water and get to the drop pod."
And this especially sucks because I love the music for this game. It has its own personality, different from the first game, while still being Subnautica. A good example of this is the first song in the track, Below Zero, which reminds me partially of the Minecraft beta soundtrack by C418, with a mix of the hand pans and the chimes in the song, with the synth that is suited for a futuristic game like Subnautica. In fact, I feel like the Minecraft soundtrack in general is a good parallel to this soundtrack. You have the bass soundtrack for the first game, which is like the Minecraft Alpha album in this situation. It's calm at times, hype at others, sets the tone and environment well, and is iconic. On the other hand, you have the Below Zero soundtrack. In this case, it's represented by the beta soundtrack. It's more complicated, more experimental, and more out there, signifying a new step for the game series.
By the way, I have a script kinda in the works for a Minecraft video if you guys want to see that in sometime in the future. So yeah.
This step for Subnautica's case, however, is a step forward in concept, but a step back when compared to the first game, which is an actual masterpiece. The problem with this spin-off game is that while it's technically a sequel to the first game, at times it can feel like a prelude. The first game is more open, more grandiose, while Below Zero is more confined and reserved. Again, don't get me wrong, I love the concept and atmosphere for both games. The problem is that one of these concepts is implemented worse than the other. Riding off the negativity is even more negativity with my next section, the controversy. Alright, so what exactly is the quote-unquote controversy? What was the drama that I have been hinting at since the beginning of the video? It's not actually all that surprising, don't get me wrong, it's bad stuff, but I feel like there's another person doing this and getting cancelled for it every other week. This thing is so cliche and almost lazy, going off of like the scale of bad things to do online, that it's the controversy version of dream theory. It's our old friend, racist and transphobic tweets. There's a post on the Subnautica subreddit by a mod that goes into a bit more detail regarding the situation, but to sum it up, the tweets, which included making fun of third world country immigrants, denouncing some issues that women face being women, and the 50 billionth "I identify as an attack helicopter" joke seemingly reflected in even more bigoted personality in real life. There was a whole other fiasco that the post also mentioned that goes over a somewhat related controversy after Unknown Worlds, the creators of Subnautica, fired Simon Chizinski. Basically, there's this now super popular mod for Subnautica that came out called Return of the Ancients that is partially led by this YouTuber, Anthomnia, I think I'm saying that right. And he was apparently acquaintances with Simon before he was fired. So he decided to hire Simon for the sound work for his mod. Now, what I still don't understand is why Anthomnia even hired Simon in the first place. Like, sure, he knew the guy and talked with him, but he was also acknowledged by Unknown Worlds as like the Subnautica guy and was on good terms with them. When he hired Simon, this of course created some tension between Anthomnia and Unknown Worlds. And I don't really know anything past that, and honestly I don't really know how much of this I got right either. I couldn't find too much information regarding this situation outside the tweets and a few posts by related parties, though I'm probably not the best source, mostly making video essays about my opinions on music, which is of course subjective, so I encourage you to look into this yourself and post some comments or corrections updating me if you find any updates on the situation. Anyway, to end it off, I just really want to say that this game did kind of change my life. Not only did it partially help me get into things like music and sound design, but it also inspired my more niche interests in horror and speculative biology. And while the soundtrack of the first game and pretty much the entirety of the second game does have a bit of controversy surrounding it, both games' identities regarding their soundtracks and sounds are distinct, surprising, haunting, and of course beautiful. So, I'm going to go stare at the clock until the early access for the next one in the series comes out, then subsequently pull out my hair waiting another year for the full release. Goodbye.